have a lot of feelings. Very few of them are positive. Hello friends, my name is Jess. Welcome to my channel and welcome to what is going to be possibly a very long, but hopefully very fun video. As you can probably tell from the title, I decided to read 3 of the most classic teen vampire series and pit them against each other to see which one is the best. I've also reformatted this video quite a few times and it's still pretty convoluted. Bear with me. It's not as messy as some of these books are, so I don't feel too bad about it. But before going into the ranking system, let me introduce you to the contestants. First up, we have Vampire Diaries by L.G. Smith, possibly the very beginning of all teen vampire series. That feels like a bold statement, but I'm not gonna fact check it. This is the only series that I never read before deciding to do this video, and I can honestly say my life was better before. The premise is pretty basic. Elena is your classic queen bee in high school who has set her eyes on Stefan. To no one's shock but her, Stefan turns out to be a vampire. Things are going well until a scary series of events makes them realize that Damon, Stefan's equally vampiric brother, may have followed him into the town. Next up, we have Twilight by Stephanie Meyer. L.J. Smith might have birthed the genre, but Stephanie Meyer is the one who brought this genre to fame. If you haven't heard of Twilight before, bless your soul, I wish I hadn't either. In this series, Bella Swan moves to Forks to live with her father during her last few years of high school. Unbeknownst to her, this town is also the home to a family of vampires, including Edward Cullen, who falls in love with her because love is more socially acceptable than murder, I guess. And our final contestant is Vampire Academy by Rochelle Mead, who is the ultimate winner of this competition. That's not a spoiler, that's literally just how I rigged this game to go. Vampire Academy is my favorite of all the series, and I came up with this video with the sole intent of proving that it is the superior teen vampire book. In the Vampire Academy world, vampires are split into 3 subsets. You have the Dampiers, who are actually half human, half vampire. You have the Moroi, who are classic vampires, and then you have the Strigoi, who are immortal and very dangerous vampires with no soul. Vampire Academy centers around 2 girls, Lisa Dragomir, a Moroi royal who is being hunted down by the Strigoi, and her best friend Rose Hathaway, who has dedicated her entire life to being Lisa's guardian. This book begins when Rose and Lisa are taken back to St. Vladimir's Academy, which is a school for Moroi and their protectors. Now on to the ranking system. We have 5 categories: vampire lore, plot, romance, characters, and the overall entertainment value. In each category, I will rank the series 1 to 3, with 3 being the best. So the first place book will get 3 points, second place will get 2 points, last place will get 1 point. At the end of the video, the book series with the greatest amount of points will win. Again, this is a rigged competition. I'm not hiding that. Vampire Academy will be the winner. This is about the journey, not the destination. And as a little bit of a warning, this video will be rife with spoilers. It literally would be no fun if I couldn't talk about the specifics, about the details and the spoilers of these books, so be prepared for that. Oh, and as another thing, I did want to dedicate this video to my friend Nicole from Nicole Reads, because I feel like she'll get a real kick out of it. So the first category, vampire lore. Just to give you a quick rundown of the vampires in each world. First up in Vampire Diaries, we do have some classic lore. Sun does damage and can kill vampires, although if you wear lapis lazuli, it can protect you from the damages of the sun. These vampires do have to be invited into homes, but things like garlic and crosses don't necessarily hurt them. We know that they can drink either human or animal blood, and that all of their vampires are capable of achieving the same level of magic depending on what blood they drink and the actions that they take over the course of their lives. We also know they have the ability to influence the minds of humans. In Twilight, it's a bit tweaked. They're basically super strong humans who sparkle in the sun and have iron deficiencies. Most of the vampire lore that I've already mentioned really doesn't apply to them. Sun doesn't hurt them at all, it just makes them sparkle. They can also drink animal or human blood, and some of their vampires do have extra abilities such as being able to read minds or being able to see the future. What I think sets apart Twilight vampires from the other vampires is that they are known to be scary, beautiful, and it's mentioned that it's literally meant to help them hunt because it lures in the victims. And then in Vampire Academy, lore is thrown out the damn window. Like I mentioned, you have 3 subsets of vampire-ish beings. If you're Moroi, sun makes you uncomfortable, but it doesn't kill you like it would if you were Strigoi. Both Moroi and Strigoi are capable of compulsion and influencing the mind. As far as I'm aware, there was no mention of them drinking animal blood, so so let's just go with they only drink human blood. I don't know if they're capable of drinking animal blood. Dhampirs, being half human, don't drink blood at all. And then Moroi are capable of wielding elemental magic, although as they grow older, they start to specialize in a specific element. Strigoi are basically everything that Edward thinks he is, just soulless murdering monsters. Now we're starting off this video with a shock. I'm actually gonna give the top spot to Vampire Diaries. If you're a Vampire Diaries fan, savor this moment. It's literally the only time it's gonna happen. Vampire lore is the only thing that I think they did well. My issue with vampire stories like Twilight is always that their vampires just aren't scary enough to my taste. But Vampire Diaries doesn't try to make their vampires less than what they are. The traditional lore makes vampires out to be super scary, super vicious monsters, so I don't appreciate series where they're tamed. And to some extent they're kind of tamed in Vampire Diaries, but they're the least tamed in my opinion. I love that in Vampire Diaries there's an incentive for drinking human blood over animal blood. In Twilight there's no difference besides the fact that human blood is just more alluring and more satisfying, but in Vampire Diaries it literally causes a power difference. You are more powerful and more capable of advanced magic if you drink human blood versus drinking animal blood. It kind of creates interesting moral situations. For instance, when Elena first died, Stefan had to grapple with the idea of drinking human blood in order to avenge her death because he knew without it he just wasn't strong enough to fight against Damon. And of course, I'm endlessly grateful that the Vampire Diary vampires don't sparkle. I think it's a little convenient that lapis lazuli, a stone the exact color of Elena's eyes, protects them from the sun, but at least the sun does some damage and can kill them, so I'll take what I can get. I like the other bits of lore that they add in order to add restrictions to their power, because I really hate it when powerful characters can essentially do whatever they want and they don't have much in their way. So I like that they need to be invited into homes. I think it was used well as a plot device, although I maintain that it shouldn't have worked for Elena when she used it against Damon. Essentially, Elena manages to keep Damon away from her for a minute because while he was invited into her home, her bedroom specifically was part of the original home, whereas the rest of the house was built on top of the original home. So I guess in that sense they were considered two different homes, and so he had to be invited into both, which is utter BS in my opinion. It shouldn't have worked at all, but whatever, you know. We needed Elena to have a moment of cleverness, even though I don't think it shouldn't have worked. I also mentioned that crosses don't technically work on these vampires, but Stefan does mention that if the person holding the cross or other religious symbol wholeheartedly believes in it, it does have an effect on their vampires, but it's more so the belief than it is the symbol, because a person with strong faith would then in turn have a strong mind able to withhold against compulsion and the influencing of the mind a little bit better than someone who doesn't. Which I actually think is an improvement on the original lore, because I always thought it was weird that it was specifically crosses that harm vampires. What about religious symbols from other religions that aren't Christianity? Raises some questions, so yay for inclusivity, I guess? While flawed, Vampire Diaries did stick to traditional lore the most, and while I don't think they're the scariest in comparison to Strigoi, it is traditional, I like the traditional, and if this wasn't a romance series, it could have been scarier. Now Vampire Academy gets the second spot. I knew right off the bat that they weren't going to get the first spot just because they made me say what felt like a dozen different phrases, all essentially meaning vampire. I still don't feel comfortable pronouncing the word Dhampir, so they were not gonna get first place just for that reason alone, for making my life harder than it needed to be. The Vampire Academy lore system is honestly just so complicated. I felt like we were still learning new things in book 5. I'll give it's a more original lore system, which is why I think it deserves more points than Twilight, which is maybe more traditional. But at the end of the day, I want my vampires scary, and Strigoi are the scariest. I did have a moment of doubt with the whole Dhampir thing, not gonna lie. Because in the same vein, Twilight does the half-human, half-vampire hybrid thing a whole lot scarier than Dhampirs do. From what I can tell, in the Vampire Academy series, Dhampir pregnancies are just like a normal pregnancy. There's no real risk or anything scary to it. Twilight goes in a more gruesome direction because you get to experience Bella being pregnant and essentially being killed and ripped from the inside by her child. Is that a plus? Did I want to experience this pregnancy from her perspective? I don't know, but it's definitely more vicious, so I'll give them that. Twilight did that better in my opinion, because it just doesn't make sense to me for a half-human, half-vampire baby to not be difficult to give birth to. But still, Twilight vampires sparkle, and I can't get past that. For that reason alone, they would get last place. There are more reasons though. With both Vampire Academy and Twilight, I really don't know how I feel about the fact that vampires can have special abilities and special powers, because I feel like that opens the door for a character to be miraculously powerful, and so because of that be be special and above all the other characters and kind of edging into a Mary Sue territory and things like that. And you kind of see that with both Lisa and Bella. Lisa being super special because she can control spirit, which granted other spirit users do start to pop up, so it's a little less special, but Lisa is still the only one who can bring Strigoi back and turn them back into either Dampiers or Moroi, whatever they were before. With Bella, you hear time and time again about how she's so special because different vampire powers don't seem to work on her, and then when she becomes a vampire and she manifests as a shield, she's also seems to be the most powerful shield in the universe in comparison to other shields like Renata. It borders on annoying because at least in Vampire Diaries, all of the vampires are capable of the same things and it's just up to them and their decisions to see how powerful they will be. In the other two series, you either are special or you're not. I'm less annoyed by Lisa's power because while both Lisa and Bella had to train in order to develop their power, Lisa spent way more time doing it. Even in the last book, I feel like she was still trying to develop her power, still had things that she wasn't capable of doing like other spirit users were, and Lisa also had more of a price to pay. Because as you can see, spirit kind of leaves a dark energy residue that drives Lisa to being angry and borderline suicidal and wanting to hurt herself and things like that. So Lisa has more of a price to pay. Lisa has to work harder for that power. And so for that reason, I liked Vampire Academy's way of doing it better than I liked Twilight's way of doing it. Now on to plot. We're gonna go in reverse here. I'm gonna start with last place, which is going to be, wouldn't you know it, Vampire Diaries. The plot's god-awful and doesn't make sense from the very beginning. There are multiple moments where things would get mentioned as if they had already happened, and I would be left utterly confused, wondering if I accidentally skipped a few pages or something. That was never the case. Like I mentioned in my wrap-up video, one of the examples is Elena saying that Stefan was in love with her, and I'm like, no, that never happened on the page. Another example is Bonnie's role as a psychic. She went from completely denying that she even had premonition to suddenly knowing everything she needs to know about her psychic powers. And it doesn't make any sense because even she herself has said that she has no training in it. Why exactly does she know how to do all of the things that they need her to do? What I will say is that I appreciate that Elena and other characters had reasonable reactions to finding out that vampires are real. I don't care how in love you are. There's no way that your initial reaction isn't fear. I also liked that Stefan got accused of murder because, like, come on. The vampires in these books are always suspicious and you're gonna try to tell me that not one of them has been accused of something like murder at any point? You're kidding me, right? But that's probably the only thing that they did well, to be honest. The Vampire Diaries plot is essentially just centuries-long love triangles, and if that doesn't sound boring to you, then I guess maybe you'll like this, but it was absolutely boring to me. Catherine was absolutely an idiot thinking that sacrificing herself would get Stefan and Damon to reconcile, and that stupid decision really set the tone for everything that followed. Overall, I just don't think this should have been 4 books. Book 4 shouldn't have existed. It does not flow well with the first 3 books, and you cannot convince me that L.J. Smith had that plotline in mind when she first started writing the series. She just realized that the first 3 books were successful and she decided to throw on a 4th one. That's what happened, I'm sure of it. The first 3 books didn't even need to be a series. It totally could have been condensed into 1 book and then fleshed out a little bit. It would have been way more solid if it had been worked on as a standalone book. The 3 books themselves are super short. I think each one is about 200 something pages. So it definitely could have been done and it would have resolved some of my issues by adding in some scenes that I thought were missing. Oh, also, death is not sacred in this series. Elena's a goddamn cat at this point with the amount of times she's died. Death has no emotional impact. Second place in the plot category is gonna be Twilight. If Vampire Diaries wasn't so bad, Twilight would be last, honestly, because it felt like 90% exposition, 7% action, maybe, and then 3% resolution. In all fairness, you could say that the romance itself is the plot line because these are romance novels, but it didn't even feel like plot. Maybe it's because I went into it knowing that there would be action at the end of all of the books, so everything before that action started just felt like exposition to me. What it did better than Vampire Diaries is that none of it felt like tack-ons. The 4 books altogether do kind of feel like a snowball effect. You're slowly building up to the ultimate big bad Volturi. The latter half of Breaking Dawn was interesting. You know, things start getting tense, you're preparing for a war. I loved seeing all of the new vampires we got introduced to, and honestly, if all of the books had been like the latter half of Breaking Dawn, I would have liked this series more. But ultimately, it was the biggest letdown of my life. The Volturi just walk away. We slogged through thousands of pages waiting to see what would happen and if the Volturi would ever get taken down, and we got nothing. Bare minimum resolution. I felt like it was a big letdown. It just didn't satisfy me, and I don't know how it satisfied other people. I also don't know why Stephanie Meyer keeps writing the same book over and over again when she could finally give us the action-driven Volturi takedown that we have been waiting years for. Basically, the 4 books in the series can be broken down to a single sentence purpose, all leading up to Bella being a vampire. Book 1, the point is to get Edward and Bella to fall in love, and at the end, sprinkle in some insecurity for Edward to start thinking about Bella's human fragility. Book 2, get them to decide that eventually Bella has to become a vampire. Literally the whole book is just leading up to Edward being a total drama queen and getting involved with the Volturi, 1, to introduce them as the ultimate villain, but 2, to put an incentive on Bella having to become a vampire. Sprinkle in a little competition to start the whole love triangle thing that everybody loves, and while we're at it, get Bella to experience some depression, but don't take her to therapy so that she becomes unhealthily dependent and attached and feel an all-consuming need to be a vampire in order to be with Edward. Book 3, get them to finally set a date for Bella becoming a vampire. Also maybe finally remember that Victoria was a plotline that you laid down and resolve that finally. And then book 4, get Bella pregnant because what's more romantic than an 18-year-old girl pregnant, I guess, and then make her a vampire. Honestly, the pregnancy plot was super gross. Maybe this is coming from a perspective where simultaneously I'm at the age where some of my peers are getting pregnant, but also I'm at the age where getting pregnant is my biggest nightmare, so I'm coming in with that point of view, but also Bella's still 18 when she gets pregnant, and I don't know, it felt a little bit romanticized and maybe encouraging people to have kids too young without fully realizing the consequences and the impact of that. But anyway, first place in the plot category is, of course, Vampire Academy. This is the only series that had a plot wholly separate from romance. The action for each book starts up pretty quickly, you have a tense atmosphere, clues and intrigue are being laid down almost from the very first page, so you feel the anticipation, you're trying to figure this out along with the characters, and it's so interesting. Literally from the very first page you're asking yourself, why did Rose and Lisa run away from St. Vladimir's Academy when it's supposedly the safest place for them to be? And eventually you figure out it's because Miss Carp gave them a warning. And honestly, just look at Miss Carp as a character. First, her warning is the catalyst for them running away and then eventually being brought back. Later you find out that she turned into a Strigoi willingly and you're not sure why, but then you find out it's because she was a spirit user. And that raises the question of, will Lisa maybe one day decide to become a Strigoi in order to escape all of the negative effects of being a spirit user? We don't know. I certainly thought that that was a possibility, but then later Miss Carp comes up again as a Strigoi and you see the spirit power being used on her to turn her back into a Moroi because she has vital information. And then Mrs. Carp's relationship with one of the Guardians allowed Rose to get information that she needed and have an ally in the things that she needed to do in order to get other things done. I just think Miss Carp is a perfect example of how seemingly minor characters can come back again and again with more information and eventually playing a major role. With Vampire Academy, you can just never guess what's going to be important later on, so it really keeps your eyes open, it keeps you engaged because you're trying to figure out what's going on, you're trying to keep an eye out for the little details. There are all these moving pieces, all doing their own things, all having their own goals and motivations, and when all of these pieces click together or come back up later, it's honestly mind-blowing sometimes. And there are so many layers to the plotline as well. From the beginning, there's been a political subplot brewing because you know that there's some discontent between the Moroi who want to learn how to fight and the Moroi who want to live their traditional lives and let the Dhampirs protect them. And there's also discontent between the Moroi and the Dhampirs who feel like they have to give up literally everything about them, give their lives, all of their joys in order to protect the Moroi who don't always appreciate them. There are also concerns about the Strigoi because they're acting weird, they're gathering in larger clumps, they're acting like a team, which they've never done before, and you question what exactly is going on, what is their scheme, why are they acting out of character? And then once you're introduced to the court, there's a whole worry about political corruption. There's just so much going on in this series. My favorite plotline personally was Rose hunting down Dimitri in order to kill him after he's become a Strigoi. Not only do you get to see more of the world, where you get to go to Siberia, you get to see some of the Dhampir villages, you learn about the alchemists, things like that, but you also get to see Rose grieving. Next up, we have romance. This one was hard. I was stuck on who deserved last place because while the Vampire Diaries romance was pathetic, the Twilight one was abusive, so Ultimately, I gave Vampire Diaries last place, but hear me out. I hated the romance between Elena and Stefan, and their initial feelings were no basis for an actual relationship from the get-go. Elena is initially physically attracted to Stefan, but literally the reason she sets her sights on him is because he doesn't give her the time of day. It's said in the books that she is shocked and annoyed that Stefan doesn't stop to stare at her while she's walking by like all of the rest of the boys in school. She just can't fathom someone not being totally in love with her, and then from Stefan's perspective, he's initially attracted to Elena because she looks exactly like his old love interest, Catherine. That's it. Listen, I'll give that Edward and Bella's initial attraction to each other is also just as shallow. Edward's just interested in Bella because he can't read her mind. I guess she's special for being like no thoughts, head empty. And then Bella is drawn in by his vampire good looks just like everyone else. But when it comes to Edward and Bella's relationship, their relationship at least develops beyond that. You get to see them banter very often. You get to see them hang out and just talk to each other and just do things together like any normal couple would. Granted, their relationship gets really serious really fast, but in all fairness, how different is that from any other high school relationship you've seen? With Elena and Stefan though, their relationship went from 0 to 100. I had to double check because I was seriously confused about how fast their relationship developed. So I double checked the dates, and book 1 starts in September. They don't get together until like October, and then book 3 ends in December. So that's 3 months. In that time, they confess their love for each other, they become utterly obsessed with each other, and they become engaged. At least in Twilight, Edward and Bella were together for like a year before they became engaged. Small mercies, but it's a mercy. Elena and Stefan's relationship was just boring. There was no natural growth to it, there was no natural development. I was more interested in the love triangle with Catherine. Hell, I was more interested in Stefan's relationship with Matt. I thought they had way more chemistry than Elena and Stefan did, and seeing their friendship develop was way cuter. So, like mentioned, Twilight gets second place because I do feel like their relationship at least has growth. They're instantly attracted to each other, but at least they're not instantly together. They actually find each other annoying at first. And that banter that they had before they got together remains there throughout the relationship. That was personally my favorite part of their relationship. I liked seeing them snipe at each other. You also see them get to know each other and their characters pretty well, enough so that they can predict each other's actions and what they're thinking and what they're gonna do. Except for some serious exceptions, i.e. the entirety of New Moon and Edward thinking that Bella wasn't gonna be utterly destroyed by him leaving. That was dumb on his part. He should have known better. All of that aside though, I did not support their relationship until Bella was already a vampire. Up until that point, I thought their relationship was very unhealthy, very controlling, very abusive. Bella did not exist out of their relationship. Her confidence was non-existent. She was scarily dependent on Edward for joy in her life. And same with Edward, to be honest. He literally decided to commit suicide just because he thought Bella might be dead. What healthy person decides to do that? But anyway, beyond that, Edward was just controlling. I don't feel like he saw Bella as a person capable of making her own decisions and having her own opinions, and if he saw her as a person capable of making decisions, he certainly did not respect those decisions and didn't respect boundaries. He always overrode her choices, saying that she didn't know how to keep herself safe and so he had to do it for her. Eclipse specifically made me so angry. I was legitimately furious reading through that book because that's where the relationship got peak abusive. Basically, Edward's whole goal through the majority of that book, I would say, was trying to keep Bella from seeing Jacob because he thought shapeshifters were too dangerous. I think that's a stupid reason considering vampires are dangerous too. But even if his reasoning wasn't moot, Edward's actions were deplorable. He literally broke down her car so that she wouldn't be able to go drive over to La Push and see Jacob. He bribed Alice into kidnapping and babysitting her while he was away for the weekend so that she couldn't see Jacob. Now, I'm no expert, but I'm pretty sure isolating you from your friends is one of the first signs of an abusive relationship. And what, we just decided to ignore that for these books? We just decided the romance was too cute, that it was adorable? No. It was gross. I don't support it. Edward had no respect for her autonomy, no respect for boundaries. He started stalking her and watching her through her window before she ever consented to it, and that's not okay in any sense of the word. Bella also had some questionable decisions, mainly pressuring Edward into changing her into a vampire, and then when he kept saying that he didn't want to, going behind his back to talk to his family members in order to get them to agree to doing it. Messed up in so many ways because essentially she was trying to force him into an eternal relationship, and it felt like the vampire equivalent of trying to get pregnant intentionally in order to save the relationship. Speaking of marriage, that whole situation was also messed up. Bella was so blatantly uncomfortable with this whole thing. Their relationship is honestly just a lot of them pressuring each other to do things that they're not exactly okay with, and us somehow having to be okay with it. Once Bella was a vampire, I thought it was a lot better. I thought they were more on equal footing. In all fairness, I do think Edward's growth began before that. He did start making an effort to respect Bella's wishes and letting her do what she thought was best, but it wasn't until Bella was a vampire that their relationship was actually healthy in some way. They had more confidence in themselves and each other, they had more trust in each other and let them do what they thought was best. I do still think it's a little messed up that if one of them had died, the other would have died too, even though they had a whole daughter to take care of, but baby steps, I guess. Honestly, during New Moon, I totally supported Bella being with Jacob instead. Not at that time, because Bella wasn't ready for a relationship, but I think there was more potential there. Bella did say time and time again that being with Jacob brought her peace and happiness, so I feel like that relationship would have been healthier for her in the long run. Granted, apparently all of that romantic potential was just Jacob being attracted to her eggs, which is a whole gross thing to think about. So I did initially support them being together more than I supported her and Edward being together, and then Jacob started getting all possessive and pushy and didn't respect her boundaries either, going so far as to emotionally manipulating her into kissing him because otherwise, if she didn't, he was gonna put himself in a situation where he could get killed. You know what? I'm not team Jacob, I'm not team Edward, I'm team therapy. Bella doesn't need a relationship, Bella needs therapy. And so somehow the romance that started as a student-teacher relationship got first place. Think about that for a second. Let me just preface this by saying that I would never support their relationship in real life. Rose was a student, Dimitri was her instructor and her mentor. There was also a 7-year age gap. Rose was 17, Dimitri was 24 at the time. There was a power imbalance, just so many reasons as to why their relationship was inappropriate. Ultimately, their relationship was way more solid, way more equal than the other relationships that I've talked about so far. Rose and Dimitri were solidly friends before, way before they were ever in a romantic relationship. There was a lot of banter, which I loved. They knew each other really, really well, down to the little details, like Rose knowing that Dimitri has a fondness for cowboy westerns. And before ever being romantic, they also knew each other really intimately as well. It's repeatedly said that they're pretty evenly matched in a fight, just because they always know and can guess what the other is thinking, what moves the other would be taking. And it also comes in situations where they have to work as a team. They work really well with each other, they understand each other on a very deep level, and so they work well together as equals. And they also understand each other on a deep emotional level as well. Rose has said that Dimitri is the only one who really understands her motivations and her dedication to being a guardian and laying down her life for Lisa. And ultimately that emotional understanding is why Rose decides to hunt Dimitri down and kill him because he is Strigoi. Because she knows that he would never want to live his life like that, and because she would want him to do the same thing for her if she was in that situation. I just really appreciated that ultimately they just want what's best for each other. Killing Dimitri would have been such a difficult thing for Rose. It would have broken her inside on some level, and she was still willing to do it because she knew that ultimately that was what was best for him. And honestly, that whole plotline where she's hunting down Dimitri is just another reason to love this romance, because I love tragedy, I love grief, I love conflict, I love being sad. And that whole book, which I think is the third book, but I'm not sure, but that whole book was just tragedy the whole time. I loved it. Rose isn't paralyzed by her love. She doesn't need Dimitri to exist. Unlike some people, losing Dimitri didn't end Rose's life. She still had her goals, she still had her motivations, and she even made an attempt to move on with Adrian and really give that relationship her all. And I appreciate that once Dimitri came back into the picture, he 100% supported that relationship. There was some questionable pressure on Rose's side where at first she wasn't believing Dimitri when he said he didn't want to be together, but ultimately she did decide to respect his wishes. She made an effort, albeit a poor effort. Honestly though, and this is a hot take, I kind of think Rose should have ended up with Adrian. Hear me out. I'll admit that Adrian needed a lot of help. He needed a lot of growth and to do some inner searching before he could be good for Rose. And for Adrian too, I'm on team therapy. But ultimately, I think their relationship could have been really good. Dimitri and Rose's life together is always going to be complicated. It was complicated from the start. It's still complicated now because they have their own jobs to do, and there's always going to be the question of whether or not they can do their job to its fullest extent when they're supposed to sacrifice their lives for the Moroi they're protecting and not potentially for each other. So their life isn't less complicated. It's a miracle it worked out as well as it did in the end. I thought that was convenient. And eventually I think they should have to deal with the fallout of the fact that Rose was a minor when they first got together. So I just think Adrian and Rose could have brought out the best in each other. I think Adrian needed someone to keep him more grounded, someone who would make him work for it, who would make him more selfless, even though Adrian was pretty selfless to begin with in my opinion. And in turn, Adrian provided endless support for Rose, always trusted her when she said she needed to do something, didn't try to hold her back. And I think he provided provided comfort and potentially helped her relax, helped her feel like a normal person. And now on to characters. Once again, Vampire Diaries is in last place. I hated Elena. I was pretty shocked because I had seen an episode of the show before and she's so different in the show, a completely different girl. In the book, she is literally described as the girl every boy wanted and every girl wanted to be. Literally, she verbally calls herself the queen of the school, which is just tacky. She's so stuck up and kind of mean. She gets really short with her friends and sort of bosses them around, and I spent a lot of this series wondering why her friends stuck around for as long as they did. Elena's just a whiny brat. I'm not even gonna get started on how she treated her aunt, especially following her engagement with Stefan, but needless to say, it was deplorable, she was a brat, and then she takes advantage of her friends so many times, particularly Matt, time and time again. I felt like she treated Matt's emotions so callously. She just continues to ask him for favors and flaunts her deep love for Stefan, as if she didn't just break up with him and start dating Stefan right after, as if he doesn't have any feelings about that, as if he isn't grieving the loss of that relationship. She should have let Matt have his own space, to be honest. The only thing that redeemed Elena is the fact that she got called out for all of the things she did, and arguably grew throughout their books. I really, really loved when Matt in particular called her out and told her that she only cares for herself and only cares about what other people can do for her, because I thought that was a very astute observation of her character. Matt was one of two characters that I actually liked in this series. He's genuinely a good guy, he genuinely cares about his friend and tries to help his friends whenever he can. He's one of the few characters in this book, if not the only one, who has a normal reaction to things. He's actually uncomfortable with the fact that Stefan is a vampire, whereas everyone else just turns a blind eye to that. Damon is the other character that I actually like in this book. Personally, I think he deserves the most improved award because he went from being angry and stereotypically evil to helping out and caring for his brother. He's still got darker morals, he's still kind of an asshole, but he's changed. One of the best things that LJ Smith did was honestly how Damon was in Veils as a character and as more than just a villain. Everyone else was super one-dimensional. Stefan was a heartbroken puppy who just hated himself, hated Damon, felt guilty, etc, etc. Tyler was a creepy bully. Caroline was the mean queen bee rival. Meredith was the badass friend, and Bonnie was the ditzy friend until book 4 when she actually grows a backbone. But I'm not going to count that as character development because it all happened off page, so that was sloppy and lazy in my opinion. Twilight once again gets second place. I've mentioned a lot of the reasons why I don't like Edward, for instance, because he is abusive and controlling, but ultimately he's just a whiny drama queen. For example, just abandoning Bella and completely cutting off contact as if that's a rational thing to do, and then going all the way to Volturi to get himself killed just because his girlfriend was maybe dead, and you know what, there's a lot of examples of that. Jacob is also possessive and annoying, but in all fairness, he acts his age, so maybe that's why I found him annoying. Bella was also annoying and made so many dumb decisions, but I also feel bad saying that because honestly, she just needed therapy. Maybe she would have been a better character if she got that therapy. In general, I liked Charlie. I thought he deserved better, but he also had some questionable decisions because he supported Jacob when he forced a kiss onto Bella. I hated that entire thing. I thought he should have shown more support to his daughter instead of blaming her for leading Jacob on. We're not even going to talk about whether Bella led him on. She kind of did, but even so, she said no, she didn't want that kiss. It was messed up that Jacob did that and that Charlie supported him for it. I loved Rosalie and Emmett though, to be honest. Everyone loves Alice, but I'm indifferent at best and at worst dislike her a lot because she just went along with Edward's controlling nature and was so easily bought. Rosalie and Emmett though, solid. Hearing Rosalie's backstory kills me every time, but I loved her revenge. I loved her touch of theatrics. I thought Rosalie was so great. She's also the only one that has a reasonable reaction to Bella wanting to become a vampire, in my opinion. She's the one who gives the most reasonable explanation as to why Bella shouldn't and what Bella's giving up doing that. Her behavior towards Bella and the baby was a little bit sus, but at least she supported Bella in her decisions, so yeah. And then Emma was just fun. I didn't have anything against the other werewolves. I don't know why Jasper was a Confederate soldier. None of us asked for that. None of us wanted that. And then of course, Vampire Academy is at the top for characters once again. This is a rigged competition. I wasn't kidding. But in my own defense, Vampire Academy does have the largest range of characters and has the most character growth and development throughout the books. You see Rose becoming more mature, she makes less rash decisions based on her temper, and you see her fully realizing the reality of the world she's in and the life she has chosen for herself. Her relationship with Lisa is also very interesting because the dynamic they're used to is Rose always being the protector and Rose giving up everything for Lisa. So that pivotal moment where Rose decides to leave the academy to chase after Dimitri caused such a shift and such a growth in their relationship because Rose was finally putting herself first and Lisa had to grapple with that. Lisa really grew as a friend, realizing that friendship has to be mutual and coming to that point where where she decided she was going to support Rose in everything that she did as well, and she was going to help her friends in anything that she could. Lisa also grew as a leader, in my opinion. I think she'd make a great queen. I think she has a lot of care for her people. What's so great about Vampire Academy is that every character, no matter how minor, had some growth, had some backstory. They were more important than just a plot device. Mia grew leaps and bounds throughout the series. Queen Tatiana became so interesting. She was already interesting as a potential villain, but realizing that she was doing a lot of things behind the scenes and was actually not as traditional as they thought was super interesting. Dimitri also had really important growth because he was put through his worst nightmare and had to deal with the consequences of that and learn how to forgive himself. Overall, just all of the characters stand on their own outside of any other relationship. They don't need romance, they don't need anything else to be awesome and to grow as people, and I thought that was amazing. And on to the last category, entertainment. To no one's surprise, Vampire Diaries is in last place. The writing was bad, so that affected my overall enjoyment of this book. It just read exactly like a teen drama show, and not even a good one. Absolutely 100% a trashy one. It wouldn't shock me at all if L.J. Smith wrote this with a TV show in mind, because a lot of the writing was choppy and would move back and forth, and it wasn't smooth, it wasn't well written. There were a couple lines that I wanted to read to you that are astonishing, the fact that they made it all the way to publication. The first one is, she finally chose a pale rose top and white linen shorts combo that made her look like a raspberry sundae. Good enough to eat. Excuse me. And then a little bit later, Elena feels like she's being watched by a crow and she starts blushing. She literally says she feels like the crow is undressing her. Granted, we find out later that the crow is actually Damon, but what? Ma'am, it's a bird. I didn't sign up for bestiality with this series. This series is just a treasure trove of bad writing, and the only consolation I have is that each book is super short. Like I mentioned in my wrap-up video, if you don't have existing nostalgia for this series, it's not worth it. Watch the show. Twilight gets second place. It's not actively bad, but it's definitely not good either. Again, a lot felt like exposition, so overall it felt kind of like a slow read. The part of Breaking Dawn after Bella becomes a vampire was 100% my favorite part of the entire series. It's where I was the most entertained, and if the entire series had had that tone, that intensity, I would have enjoyed it a lot more, but it didn't, so we're here. My least favorite part of the series was Jacob's perspective. I liked the information we got from it, but his narration was kind of annoying. Honestly, I don't think the writing style of the series is bad. There were some really beautiful lines throughout the book, but I think Stephenie Meyer needed a lot of work on her plot and characters. It was just a lot. The most entertaining part of going through the Twilight series was annotating it and writing my own commentary into it. If you ever want me to go through all of my annotations in the series, let me know. I'm happy to do an entire video on that. But on to first place, Vampire Academy. It was perfection. I loved it. I flew through those books. Even when I had to read other books for different videos or different things, I always wanted to go back to this series. It was super entertaining seeing all these clues and trying to put together the puzzle, and there were a lot of plot twists that kept me on my toes and kept me engaged. Vampire Academy isn't perfect, but it's a lot of fun. And so now we've reached the end of this video, which is probably long. As you can see at the top, we have our scoring. In last place, we have Vampire Diaries with 7 points. In second place, we have Twilight with 9 points. And of course, in first place is Vampire Academy with 15 points. I told you Vampire Academy would win. This was a rigged competition. Hope you enjoyed. If you disagree with any of the things that I said and you have your own opinions, make sure to comment below. If you think Vampire Academy shouldn't have gotten first place, you're wrong, but you can let me know that too. In the meantime, make sure to subscribe to my channel if you want more bookish content. I do post a video 2 times a week.